Right now, the National Weather Desk, severe storms caused significant damage to a local television station. Hear from a meteorologist who hid under a desk as the roof blew away.
You could feel the pressure in the building as the roof was getting sucked away.
People living in storm-weary Austin, Texas prepare for even more destructive weather.
If this just happened all in one day, then I'm worried about what's going to happen that period.
After days of record-breaking heat, the Pacific Northwest is now battling a wildfire.
Some homes in this area are under a mandatory evacuation order.
How coastal communities are adjusting in the wake of climate change, and the surprising facts about the shapes of raindrops.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
Good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm Angela Brown. Cleanup continues at our station in Abilene, Texas after a powerful storm caused extensive damage to the building Sunday night.
This is just absolutely insane. Our station is just completely ruined. Oh my God!
This is what it looked like inside after 80-mile-per-hour winds blew part of the roof off the building. Those winds also caused the partial collapse to a garage and knocked down a tower that was on top of the building. Meteorologists Mark Rolette and Caden Dinkins were in the building at the time. They hid under the desk as the roof flew away. Emily Gracie caught up with Caden yesterday to talk about this scary situation.
I went to go outside to go look at the conditions because we're stuck in a studio. We can't see anything. As I go outside, the winds really start to pick up, and I have a video where the rain and wind are kind of wrapping around each other in our back parking lot, and all of a sudden the power goes out. And as we're going back to the studio, the roof just starts to rip off of over our weather station, which is the only area that the roof ripped off of in the studio. And so the only thing we could do is not a word was said. Not a word was said. We just got down. And the closest spot we got down to that had somewhat of a sturdy surface was our weather center. So we are hunkered down under it, watching as ceiling tiles are falling down right on top of us. Luckily not heavy, luckily no metal. So to say it was an unimaginable situation is an understatement, and to think that we came out completely unharmed, not even really a scratch on my body, is just completely surreal.
Is there any sort of preliminary information on this? Was it just a wind gust or was there more to it?
They believe it's still straight line winds. That's still likely going to be the preliminary data. How fast the winds were going, there were reports over 80 miles an hour. I think it'll just be hard to determine such an isolated area. We were sort of convinced there was some rotation there. At first, you could feel the pressure in the building as the roof was getting sucked away, falling in, and you could hear your ears popped. You feel like you're getting pulled towards the wind that was getting rushed out of the studio.
Do you think that this will change the way you are as a meteorologist and affect how you warn people in the future in your career?
Absolutely. You see it happen to other stations, and some of them, they're just taking cover, but with ours, we didn't even have time to think. So you cover it for other people, but you never expect to be covering it for yourself.
Parts of Texas are expecting more severe weather this week. That includes storm-weary Austin, where people are still picking up the pieces from a microburst that hit nearly 2 weeks ago. As Vinny Martorano shows us, many people are worried about even more damage to their homes.
Well, it's just going to be a little rough if this all happened in one day. I mean, what's going to happen that long?
Multiple storms are expected to hit the Austin area this week. CBS Austin meteorologist Michael Crowley says the storms could bring potential severe risks, such as hail and damaging winds.
We are under the gun for several systems to move through.
Some Austinites on the east side of the city are still cleaning up the damage left behind by the microburst nearly 2 weeks ago.
It was a good 10 minutes of, I don't know if I'm gonna have a house after this.
All of this happened from that one tree. This entire tree just kind of collapsed right here, and no one was able to get out. So we're like kind of just trapped here.
While they're still left with debris in their yards and damage to their homes, concern is growing as the storms move closer.
Yeah, I'm worried what will happen then. Because if this just happened all in one day, then I'm worried about what's going to happen that period of time.
Be a little more careful. Make sure the cats are inside.
We're just kind of hoping for the best. I'm definitely conserving more of my my power on my lights and stuff.
Since the storms are expected to hit many parts of the city this week, Crowley says it's important for everyone to be prepared.
Look at the forecast, make sure you have a weather plan ready in case, for example, we have a microburst come through again.
Seattle should get a bit of a break today after a run of record-breaking heat. The high is only expected to reach 81 degrees, but that's still 11 degrees above average. It's a far cry from the last 2 days when the city set all-time record highs. And unfortunately, there's little rain in the forecast. That's not only bad for the drought, it's bad for wildfires, including a 60-acre fire that's burning southeast of Seattle. As Jeremy Harris shows us, many people are now evacuating.
It was just a normal Monday, and then within an hour it was disaster.
It was a race against the heat, wind, and dry fuels as fire crews scrambled to get ahead of the quick-moving Red Bridge fire in Tianwei.
So it's moving fast. Oh, they're going to dump tanker right there.
Firefighters got help from helicopters and air attack planes to track the fire as the wind pushed it north.
The conditions, we were talking about it earlier, how dry and hot, and the wind is, it's Kittitas County, so it's always windy.
Chris Keller and his family live near the fire line and could only watch as crews on the ground and the sky worked to protect their home.
Then we looked on our phones and we were like, that's less than 1,000 feet from my house. Whoa.
Neighbors tell us the winds had them worried.
We have what we sometimes call the 4 o'clock winds, where they kind of swirl and switch, and that's what you got to watch out for in the evenings. 1 minute they'll be going north, and then next they'll be going east.
Temperatures here have been around 90 degrees this week.
If you look at the mountains up there, the snow's already gone. And usually the snow doesn't leave this area till the end of July, early August.
While this was a scene neighbors feared was coming, it did not seem to catch firefighters off guard.
The whole fire department, this whole area, I mean, you can see how many there are. How many guys across the road, fire engines and everything. So yeah, they're absolutely incredible. And I do know a couple of them, so hey, Godspeed, fellas.
Tracking the tropics this morning. Tropical storms Barbara and Cosme continue to spin in the Pacific Ocean west of Mexico. Barbara briefly reached hurricane strength yesterday, making it the first hurricane of the year anywhere in the world. Both storms are expected to weaken as they enter colder waters. There's also an area of low pressure just behind those storms. It has a 70% chance of becoming a named storm over the next week. The federal government is flipping on a decision choosing to hire more staff for the National Weather Service. This comes after massive layoffs at offices all around the country. Clara Faith has more on the decision and shows us what it could mean for NOAA moving forward.
The National Weather Service is a lot like your fire department. You don't realize what it is and what they do until there's a fire.
The National Weather Service has been around for more than 150 years.
They are forecasting for recreation, for tourism, for agriculture, for everything that happens on Earth. They are forecasting the weather.
According to the U.S. Senator Maria Cantwell, at the beginning of 2025, the National Weather Service had roughly 4,300 federal employees, and the service has lost more than 500 employees since then, putting the Weather Service 18% below their necessary staff level and 33% below their normal staffing level.
Unfortunately, a lot of that was experienced meteorologists, experienced forecasters, technicians.
The administration approved the NWS to hire an additional 126 people across the country last week.
It's an unnecessary process, but at least we are getting it back together.
Colin Zarzicki is an associate professor of meteorology and climate dynamics at Penn State. He says although technology is advancing, having people on the job is important.
Computers have kind of really accelerated the meteorological field, but where we still see a lot of benefit from having kind of local meteorologists or, manual forecasters, you may say, is, these computers can have unlimited knowledge of all of the nuance of maybe a particular forecast office.
Tonight is your chance to see the strawberry full moon. Depending on where you live, it peaks somewhere between 8 and 8:30 p.m. The June full moon is typically low in the sky, but this year it will be the lowest in nearly 20 years. That often helps it have a pinkish or even an orange hue. It got the name Strawberry Moon because this is when the fruit ripens.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
In South Carolina, the effects of our changing planet show up along the coast, often in the form of flooding during severe weather events. Meteorologist Harrison Clark visited a handful of cities and towns outside of Charleston to learn about their adjustments to make their communities more resilient in the face of climate change.
From Mount Pleasant, I have noticed that some of our flood-prone areas have been impacted a little bit more than usual.
To Sullivan's Island.
Flooding happens a lot more frequently.
And all the way down to Folly Beach.
The council members, the mayor, citizens drive over this causeway every day, and it is hard to not notice the water coming up.
People are noticing the increased flooding and rise in water levels. But what are our local towns and cities doing to adapt to the changing climate? Relying on the low country's natural features was a common theme I noticed when talking with officials. We start on Sullivan's Island, where the maritime forest has proven to be beneficial.
Just recognizing that those trees can buffer the force of winds during hurricanes and can dry out the ground in between rains. And just are such a tremendous asset given the fact that we do anticipate having ever more frequent and intense storms.
For the town of Mount Pleasant and city of Folly Beach, it's oyster reefs.
When the waters rise, when there are floods, oysters are a natural form of that type of protection. So ideally, all of our river is covered in oysters, not only for the protection that it offers, but the ecosystem benefits, the commercial fishing, right?
We also have partnered with South Carolina DNR to do more oyster reef building. Some of those areas are Alhambra, Waterfront Park.
These municipalities have also adopted comprehensive plans and specific ones for sea level rise adaptation, marsh front management, and hazard mitigation. The full comprehensive plans are reviewed every 5 years by officials.
Many factors can contribute to severe weather, and to try and understand them, meteorologists use several different tools. One of those tools you may not be familiar with, but it's called lapse rate. Meteorologist Noah Hawk explains what it is and how it's used.
Severe weather is still ongoing for a lot of us here in the United States, and one of the criteria we look at in determining the probability of severe weather is known as a lapse rate. Now that's going to be a change in temperature within a change of height. And for us here on Earth, within the troposphere, which is going to be the lowest layer of the atmosphere where all of our weather is going to occur, it's going to be a decrease of temperature with an increase of height. So I want to take two different examples here, but two different lapse rates. Now they're going to measure it within Celsius per kilometer. So on my left here, we're going to have 4 degrees Celsius, and on my right, we're going to have 7 degrees Celsius. Now the one here on my left is going to start to rise a little slow. We're going to still accumulate some of those clouds as they begin to condense, but notice our 7 degrees Celsius is going to be a whole lot faster. It's going to accumulate a lot more clouds, and that's because the higher that number is, the steeper that lapse rate is going to be, which correlates to a stronger updraft. And those stronger updrafts lead to more severe storms. And especially within a severe thunderstorm, you're going to have a strong updraft that could potentially lead to you having hail, which is one of the criteria in putting out a warning. So of course, as severe weather makes its way still across a lot of the United States, you want to make sure you're always prepared for when things strike.
During severe weather, rain is common. Now most of us think we know the shape of raindrops, but as meteorologist Violet Skyber explains, it's not the teardrop shape you may think.
A teardrop shape is wrong. Raindrops never look like this. They're actually more of a spherical shape, although not a perfect sphere. They start off as a sphere when they're very, very small, only about 1 millimeter, but they change shape depending on the size. When they're 2 millimeters, they start to look like a hamburger. At 3 millimeters, more like an upside down U. And then at 4.5 millimeters or greater is when they start to split in half. But why does the shape change? Well, three factors. The first is surface tension. All this really means is that when raindrops are attracted to each other and move into one big raindrop, the wind, as the raindrop falls, goes around the outside of the raindrop, creating a spherical shape. Again, only when it's small, and that's because the wind generally goes around the outside of the raindrop. However, as the drop gets bigger, as more drops start to combine with a greater surface area, the wind starts to impact the bottom of the raindrop, not just pushing on the outside of it, but starting to push more underneath it. And that's what creates this hamburger and eventually a U shape. When it's big enough, the wind or the air pressure from it will start to break this drop apart into two small spheres. So the process starts all over again, going back to that small sphere, creating the shape, and then breaking up. That's the process that it goes through with raindrops as they fall from the atmosphere.
This Sunday is Father's Day, and in honor of the upcoming holiday, Emily Gracie sat down with the woman who is honoring her late father by sharing his story. Alonzo Smith Jr. played a pivotal role in weather's history, and it's the subject of a new book, The Weather Officer.
My dad was one of America's first Black meteorologists, and he was also an officer in the U.S. Air Force. And this was, the middle of the century, so it was somewhat unusual. There weren't very many Black Americans in either of those spaces during that time in the country. So it was very unusual that he was there. But the one thing that he did have was a lot of confidence. I believe, he was raised by his grandmother, and she was a tough cookie. And I think that she instilled a lot of the confidence in him that he carried throughout his life. He was very smart. He was smart as a young child. He skipped a couple grades in school. So he really had the aptitude for math and science, and he loved science. So all of that, I think, just helped to catapult him into the positions that he ended up in.
Okay, so doing all this research, you must have learned a lot about your dad that you didn't already know. What were some fun or maybe really surprising things that you learned in the process?
Well, it's interesting you ask that question, because I think for many of us, our dads are our heroes. My dad being my hero, I just felt that he was like always super fantastic at everything and never had any type of hardship or any type of disappointment. And going through his story, I learned that, he had disappointments and he had failures. And there were times where I know he was probably very confused as to what direction he should take in his life and his career. And so that was kind of interesting to understand, was like, okay, he wasn't perfect. Wow, my goodness. He really went through some things, and he was very imperfect, but he was always very motivated and determined to get to where he wanted to be.
To listen to the full story of Alonzo from his daughter, make sure you check out this Father's Day episode of our podcast, Off the Radar. It's available now on all podcast platforms. And time now for a short break, but first we take to the skies over Sparks Marina in Reno, Nevada.
You are watching the National Weather Desk.
A single rainbow can be a gorgeous sight to behold, but what about two of them at the same time? Meteorologist Dave Dirks explains how double rainbows form.
Now, a rainbow forms when sunlight passes through water droplets, which are more dense than air. This causes the light to bend and separate into colors. As the light hits the back of the raindrop, it reflects off this inside surface before exiting again. Now, you can only see a rainbow when the sun is behind you and the rain is in front of you. Double rainbows are usually seen when the sun is low in the sky. Early morning or late afternoon, a double rainbow develops when there is a second reflection within the same raindrop. Since the secondary rainbow is dispersed over a larger area, it is nearly twice as wide as the primary rainbow. It's interesting to note that the color sequence of the secondary rainbow is reversed.
We'd love to share your weather content on the air. You can find us on all your favorite social media platforms, including Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok. Just search the National Weather Desk. We'll be right back.